Good afternoon, and welcome to the 10th Annual Menus of Change Leadership Summit. Yes. My name is Allison, and I am Director of Health and Sustainability Programs for our Strategic Initiatives Group here at the Culinary Institute of America. This summit really changed the trajectory of my career when I attended for the first time in 2013, and I'm so honored to now serve as the lead organizer, working with our partners at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and our two incredible advisory councils to make this celebratory 10th event possible. Before we begin, let us acknowledge the land on which we gather. The Culinary Institute of America overlooks the Mohicanatuck Hudson River, named by the Mohican people, meaning the waters that are never still. The land upon which the campus sits is the ancestral home of the Wappingers and the Mohicans, both of whom belong to the Algonquin-speaking indigenous peoples. After forced treaties and wars in the 17th century, the Wappinger and Mohicans relocated to Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and joined with the Oneida people. Together, they formed the Stockbridge-Munsee tribe, also known as the Mohican Nation Stockbridge-Munsee Band, and today many of their descendants live on the Stockbridge-Munsee Indian Reserve in Shawano County, Wisconsin. We honor the indigenous people who came before us and to those with whom we now reside. We offer gratitude to their fertile grounds, which continue to offer nourishment through its bounty of foods, cultural exchange, and unceasing opportunities of learning. For over 20 years, the CIA and Harvard Chan School have been working together to translate nutrition science into actionable and delicious strategies for shifting diets and improving public health. 10 years ago, we dreamed up a new vision for integrating guidance for foods that are nutritious, environmentally sustainable, socially responsible, and delicious, with real business models and practical strategies for change within the food service industry and the culinary profession. Over the years, Menus of Change has contributed to a growing inseparability in industry conversations around personal and planetary health. Our principles of healthy, sustainable menus and related resource development, such as the Protein Flip strategy document, and a whole series of materials that seek to define and understand the term and the trend of plant forward, have collectively helped to establish a compelling new agenda and path forward for the food service industry of the future. Our Plant Forward Industry Watch List series has highlighted the incredible innovation happening across nearly every sector within the food service industry. And tomorrow, you'll hear a fascinating new set of consumer insights from our third annual Plant Forward Opportunity Report in partnership with Data Central to continue fueling your Plant Forward menu innovation as this movement continues to bloom. Menus of Change is so much more than just this annual gathering. For us at the CIA, it has become an organizing force for an entire ecosystem of initiatives seeking to operationalize the principles of healthy, sustainable, and delicious plant-forward menus and culinary strategies across different sectors and within our own educational curriculum for future industry leaders. I'd like to acknowledge and thank members of our Menus of Change University Research Collaborative, our Healthy Kids Collaborative, and our Healthy Menus R&D Collaborative, who are here with us for this summit. And I'd also like to acknowledge our CIA faculty and students, many of whom will be sitting up in the balcony and joining us for sessions, supporting the food and beverage operations behind the scenes, and participating in a series of related programming we've planned for later tonight and tomorrow during what we call a special projects day, where there are no classes so that students can engage in this critical content. We're so thrilled to be able to engage the entire CIA community in Menus of Change as we host this summit over the 3 days and think about how we want to accelerate our own efforts here throughout the rest of the year. And we hope that you too will fully immerse yourself over these 3 days and then leave feeling empowered with actionable strategies and new contacts to support next steps you'll take within your own organizations. We invite you all, those in the room and those watching online, to join us on the relentless, unapologetic pursuit of deliciousness at the intersection of health, sustainability, culture, and innovation. We know there are big, scary challenges ahead, but let us all find strength in this community of change makers. And remember, in the words of the great Mother Teresa, small things done with great love will change the world. Before I wrap up, a few housekeeping items. We have a conference app you can download to access the Menus of Change agenda and content. So you just look for the Bizzabo app to download and then log in with the ticket number that's printed on the back of your badge. Once you're in, you can follow the program agenda, learn more about presenters and sponsors, and network with fellow attendees. And from the agenda, you can click into the sessions and activities to find presentations, recipes, and menus. And for real fun, you can even enter to win a free registration to next year's Menus of Change Summit by submitting your responses to the polls. So definitely check that out. Thanks to our generous sponsors, we are live streaming the general sessions, and we'll also be posting the recorded videos on the Menus of Change website so people can watch on demand. And it's been pretty amazing. In the last 2 years that we've held Menus of Change as a virtual summit, we had a combined nearly 68,000 views. So we're really grateful to be able to share this important content with such a wide audience. And we're also very grateful to be back together in person, right? We get a little applause for that. Finally, we hope you will follow us and join the conversation on social media using these handles and the CIA MOC hashtag. And as I close, I would just like to take a moment to thank Greg Drescher, who's been the visionary leader behind Menus of Change and the CIA's entire strategic initiatives group for his 26 years of service to the college. And I'd now like to welcome to the stage the CIA's new Executive Director of Strategic Initiatives and Industry Leadership, Rupa Bhattacharya.
Thank you so much, Allison. Hi, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here. This is my 5th month heading up the Strategic Initiatives Group over here at the CIA, and I'm so excited to welcome you all to the 10th Annual Menus of Change Summit. Like Allison said, this is a time of absolutely critical urgency for all of the topics this conference addresses. As we all know, the most recent UN climate report suggests that it's now or never to make significant changes to global emissions. But it's not enough to just say it's dire and we have to do something, right? In order to enact real, meaningful change on a structural and system-wide level, we need to operate from a place of understanding and empathy and really examine how people make changes and how we get them to want to make the changes that both we and they know will make a difference in the world. We're the CIA, so we see things through a food-driven lens. How do we make people want to eat in a way that sustains their bodies, their communities, and their environment? We could yell at them. That always works, right? That's super useful. Or we could stand up here at a podium like me right now and tell them what to do. But in the 75 years we've been around, we've learned that the best way to get anyone to eat anything and to build habits and identities around eating those things is by making those things not only nutritious and sustainable, but also delicious and desirable and relevant to the way they live their lives. We're hoping that you walk away from this conference with a full battery of tools, skills, and inspiration that'll help you implement plant-forward and planet-friendly solutions in your workplaces and communities. In a lot of ways, this and everything we're doing here is like that old adage about planting trees. The best time to plant a tree was 2 generations ago, or more than that, but the second best time is now. So no matter where you are on this journey, I'm so glad you're here with us now. Slide, let's see, there we go. I'd like to thank the members of our Menus of Change Scientific and Technical Advisory Council and our Business Leadership Council, many of whom are here today, for all of their guidance in shaping both our work and this week's program, as well as our partners at Harvard H. Chan School of Public Health for making this such a fruitful collaboration over the past decade and hopefully for decades to come. And of course, this would not be possible without our sponsors. Thanks first of all to our Grand Platinum sponsor, Perfect Day, our Platinum sponsor, Oatly, and our Premium Gold sponsor, the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute. So tremendous thanks to our gold sponsors, Sigma Food Service, Kellogg Away From Home, New Wave Foods, Wonderful Company, and Yo, as well as our bronze sponsors, Illy, National Peanut Board, Nestle Professional, North Harvest Bean Growers Association, Numu Food Group, and Unilever Food Solutions, as well as, hello, let's see, will you do this? There we go. All of our supporting sponsors. It's now my pleasure, my absolute pleasure, to introduce Michael Kaufman, who, in addition to being the chair of our Menus of Change Business Leadership Council and an emeritus trustee of the CIA, is a senior lecturer at Harvard Business School with a long and storied career leading change in the restaurant sector. He'll be kicking off our first general session. Please welcome Michael to the stage.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our first general session. In this opening session of Menus of Change 2022, we're going to bring together 5 extraordinary leaders to set our stage for our time together. And each approaches the issues that we're going to be discussing over the next couple of days from a distinct and important perspective. But from my perspective, looking at the business of food and food service, we've been through, and we continue to go through, an enormously challenging time, as you know. COVID, supply chain, inflation, geopolitical conflict, domestic fragility, possible recession. There are no easy answers or solutions, but concerns about health and environment not only remain, but are even more urgent. Our first speaker will be Michelle Williams. She is the Dean of the Faculty at the Harvard Chan School of Public Health and Professor in Public Health and International Development. She's an internationally renowned epidemiologist and public health scientist, an award-winning educator, and a widely recognized academic leader. She has published more than 500 scientific articles, was elected to the National Academy of Medicine in 2016. She has an undergraduate degree in biology and genetics from Princeton, a master's in civil engineering from Tufts, and a master's and doctoral degrees in epidemiology from the Harvard Chan School. Now, Michelle could not join us in person, but provided her remarks via video. So let's watch.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being a part of this critical conversation. Menus of Change is a testament to the incredible partnership between the Culinary Institute of America and the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, one that began more than 20 years ago with a simple idea that food and the way we produce it and consume it is at the heart of public health. And thus, members of the food service industry play an essential role in protecting and improving the lives of millions around the world. That notion has never been more palpable. The COVID-19 pandemic has shone a light on the essential contributions of grocery and food service workers who put themselves in harm's way to keep us all fed. It has also highlighted our many food-related vulnerabilities, from the weak links in our global supply chain to the rise in diet-related chronic diseases and premature deaths, to the inequality that shapes the way communities eat and drives vast disparities in health outcomes. Today, more than 800 million people around the world are going hungry. Meanwhile, 2 billion more are harming their health with poor diets. Here in the United States, about half of adults now have one or more diet-related chronic diseases. But food doesn't just determine the health on an individual level. I'm sure you've all heard the saying, "You are what you eat." Well, I'm here to say that we're more accurate if we say we are what we eat, because our food choices don't just affect our own health, but the health of the planet and thus the health of everyone on it. The fact is, our diets and the food systems that support them are one of the biggest contributors to climate change and environmental disruption. After all, half the world's habitable land is used for agriculture, and food accounts for a quarter of all global greenhouse emissions. Our warming planet impacts human health in all kinds of ways, not the least of which is in the amount and types of food we can produce. For example, we know that climate change reduces crop yields, particularly at low and mid latitudes. In fact, researchers estimate that yields of wheat, rice, and maize could decline by 2% every decade for the rest of the century, even as demand rises significantly over the same period. We're also facing substantial biodiversity losses. Animal pollinators, like bees, are directly responsible for about a third of the world's food. But habitat destruction and the use of pesticides are killing them. That could have catastrophic consequences for the availability of staple crops, along with their essential vitamins and nutrients. Researchers estimate that we could see 1.4 million additional deaths annually as a result of vitamin deficiencies and loss of protected food groups like fruits and nuts and seeds, all of which can help shield us from ailments like cardiorespiratory diseases and cancer. Meanwhile, a recent study projected that as fish populations decline in the coming decades, 1 in 10 people could face micronutrients and fatty acid deficiencies. And here's something else that might shock you. Environmental changes aren't just diminishing our food supplies. They're undermining the nutritional value of the foods that we do have. For more than a decade, Harvard Chan School researchers have been growing plants in an environment that simulates the air quality we expect to see at the end of the 21st century. At that point in time, CO2 levels could rise by nearly 40% from 400 parts per million to 550 parts per million. What they're finding is truly alarming. The high CO2 levels are actually changing the internal chemistry of staple crops like wheat, rice, maize, and soybeans. It's stripping them from micronutrients like zinc and iron that are essential to the human body. It's a frightening prospect indeed. Think about this. 2 billion people around the world already are suffering from zinc or iron deficiencies, and they depend on these crops for nutrition, especially in poorer countries where meat is rarely consumed. If carbon emissions keep climbing at the current rate, by 2050, hundreds of millions could suffer devastating health problems from stunted growth to diminished cognitive function. And low and middle income countries will be the hardest hit. These are just some of the headwinds we're facing when it comes to securing healthy diets for the world's growing population. But the news is not all bad. I want to share with you some good news. We are breaking new ground every day in our understanding of nutrition and the relationship between our bodies, our environment, and our food. And as that relationship becomes clearer, so does our ability to make changes that will immediately improve our health and well-being. Because food can be a barrier to human thriving, but it is also one of our greatest assets. In a moment, you'll hear from Harvard Chan's Professor Walter Willett, who leads the Eat Lancet Commission on Healthy Diets from Sustainable Food Systems. The Commission's 2019 report was a roadmap for transforming global diets towards healthy food, and just as important, creating sustainable food systems that will minimize damage to our planets. The forthcoming 2.0 version of that report will further refine our understanding of the pathways it will take to secure healthy diets for a future population of 9 to 10 billion people. That's where all of you, the chefs, the restaurant and food service industry professionals come in. We in the public health community can shout about nutrition and sustainability until we're blue in the face. And believe me, we do. We're a lot of fun at dinner parties. But you are the literal taste makers. You are the ones with the power to make the food we eat, the food we should eat, the food we want to eat, and you have the power to transform our diets for the better. And you have an enormous footprint, not just with your consumers, but within the food system. And because of it, you are leading transformational change to expand food access, reduce food loss and waste, and improve the health of people and the planet. So I'm grateful for your partnership in this work. I want to thank you. I thank you for being here and for all that you do to nourish people around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Williams. Now, I thought I was fun at dinner parties, but maybe not. I don't know. I have to figure that one out. So next up is a good friend, Sara Bleich. Sara is the Director of Nutrition Security and Health Equity in the Food and Nutrition Service at USDA. After serving as the Senior Advisor for COVID-19 in the Office of the Secretary of USDA in 2021. She is a policy expert and researcher who specializes in diet-related diseases, food insecurity, and racial inequality, with more than 175 peer-reviewed publications. She's currently on leave at USDA from her post as Professor of Public Health Policy at the Harvard Chan School and the Kennedy School of Government and the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. She was also a White House Fellow during the Obama administration, where she worked at USDA as a Senior Policy Advisor for Food, Nutrition, and Consumer Services, and with First Lady Michelle Obama's Let's Move initiative. She holds degrees from Columbia, a bachelor's in psychology, and from Harvard, a PhD in health policy. Sara, welcome.
Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon. So it's great to be here. I want to thank Greg Drescher for the kind invitation. Thank you, Michael, for that very kind introduction. And just a big thank you to the Menus of Change team for all the coordination that it takes to kick off this conference. So as you heard, I'm Sara Bleich, and I'm the Director of Nutrition Security and Health Equity at the Food Nutrition Service, which is part of USDA. And in a couple of minutes, I'll say a little bit more about USDA in case you're not familiar with the department. And this is as you heard, my second tour of duty in the federal government. So I had the opportunity to serve as a White House Fellow in the Obama administration, and honestly went into government thinking, I don't know if I'm gonna like it, but I wanna give it a shot. I wanna understand research in the policymaking process. And I fell in love with federal service. I don't know of another way that you can really impact people's lives than in federal government. So for me, it's so much fun to be back. I've been in this post since January, and before that, spent the first year of the administration focused on COVID, also at USDA. So it's been a fascinating year and a half, as it has been, I'm sure, for all of you in terms of the twists and turns. But it's great to be here today to give you a bit of a sense of all the work that we're doing at USDA. So do want to say from the outset that if you've heard Secretary Vilsack present over the past few months, if you've heard Deputy Undersecretary Dean, or if you've heard me present, you're going to hear some repetition today, and that is very intentional. We are really trying to beat the drums around this concept of nutrition security, which I'll define for you in just a second. And what I want to do with you today is really three things. Is first, talk about some key definitions and terms that we're using and their intersections. That's nutrition security, health equity, and structural racism. Then give you a flavor of what are the things that USDA is doing to drive change and promote and enhance nutrition security, and then talk about some of the intersections with all of you and where we hope that you can help lean in and make a difference. So let's start with definitions, and I want to start at the top with nutrition security. So specifically, what nutrition security means is consistent access, availability, and affordability of foods and beverages that prevent disease. And in some cases, they help treat disease. And this is particularly true among racial ethnic minority populations, lower income populations, rural and remote populations, and also tribal communities. Now, we have gotten a lot of questions over the past several months about what is the difference between food insecurity, which is an area where USDA has focused for decades, and nutrition security. And there are really two key distinctions that you all should keep in mind. The first is that nutrition security recognizes that we're not all maintaining an active, healthy life that's consistent with federal recommendations. And the second is that it emphasizes taking an equity lens to our efforts. So put most simply, you can think of nutrition security as having consistent and equitable access to healthy, safe, and affordable food. And let's just take a second, and this is building on what Dean Williams just said, let's just take a second and think about why it is so important to lean in. And I want to leave you with 4 facts. The first is that poor nutrition is the leading cause of death in the United States and responsible for about 600,000 deaths per year. The second is that about 6 out of 10 adults are living with one or more diet-related chronic condition. The third is that most Americans do not follow a healthy diet. And the fourth is that 57% of today's 2-year-olds are expected to have obesity by the time they reach age 35. And that percentage is even higher if you are a Black or Latinx child today. So when we say health equity, what do we mean? And what that refers to is everyone having an equal opportunity to live the healthiest life possible, no matter who they are, where they live, or how much money they make. And we cannot think about equity without considering the context in which we live. And that is where structural racism comes in and where it becomes really important. So what I want to stress is that structural racism is not simply individual prejudices. What it refers to is practices that are produced and reproduced by laws, and they're sanctioned and implemented at various levels of government potentially, and embedded in the economy and societal norms. So confronting structural racism then requires not just that we change how individuals think, but that we actually change policies and practices. And I want to leave you with 2 top lines from this slide here. The first is that structural racism is real. It reaches back to the beginnings of US history, and it stretches across our institutions and economy. The second is that structural racism harms health in ways that can be described, measured, and dismantled. And this is where nutrition security comes in. This is where USDA is leaning in to make a difference, and where all of you, as folks who are on the front lines and feeding so many people, can make a meaningful difference. So if we take an equity lens, which is what our department is doing at USDA to tackle food nutrition security, we have to think about why we are so motivated to do work in this area. And the main reasons that Secretary Vilsack has chosen to prioritize nutrition security, he was the secretary also during the Obama administration, but now he has prioritized nutrition security at this moment for 2 main reasons. One is the COVID-19 pandemic, and the second is this administration's focus on racial equity. What COVID-19 did, which we all well know, is that it brought disparities and the vital need for access to healthy food right up to the forefront. So there's a study, which you may be aware of, which estimated that 2/3 of COVID-19 hospitalizations in the United States are driven by 4 diet-related chronic conditions: obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and heart failure. And disparities in these diseases are associated with decades of structural limitations to retail food outlets that sell healthier foods. So without question, promoting food nutrition security is a critical ingredient to recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, but also to ensuring racial equity. So I want to take a second and focus on a population that a lot of you care about, which is households with children. What you can see from this poll that was conducted in the summer of 21, that 60% of US households with children reported facing serious financial problems during the pandemic. And these were reported across a range of issues. So depleted household savings, serious problems paying credit card bills, other debt, and affording medical care. What's also notable, if you look at the bottom of the slide, is that the impacts are disproportionately felt among Black and Latinx households. We also right now have to acknowledge that inflation is surging. And so in May, the Consumer Price Index increased by 8.6%, which was the largest 12-month advance in 4 decades, since December of 1981. High gas and energy prices are driving this, and when you go to pay at the pump now, you may be paying as much or more of $2 more per gallon every time you go. Families are struggling. A priority of this administration is addressing inflation. Now at USDA, a number of our nutrition assistance programs are designed to respond to inflation, which means that the benefit levels adjust periodically to reflect food inflation. So now let's pivot and talk about what we're actually doing. And before I do that, I do want to take a minute and set the table about where the priorities are at USDA and who we are as a department. So at the start of this administration, Secretary Vilsack laid out 5 priorities for the entire department to focus on. One of those is food nutrition security, but there are 4 others. Addressing climate change through climate-smart agriculture and forestry, advancing racial justice, equity, and opportunity, creating more and better market opportunities, and making USDA a great place to work. To tackle food nutrition security, we are leveraging all of our assets to make moves towards healthier eating in an equitable way. And so within USDA, we have the Food, Nutrition, and Consumer Services mission area, which is where I sit. We're sort of the tip of the spear when it comes to food nutrition, and we are leading a department-wide effort to really pull all of our equities together to focus in this area. Now, one of the things that few people realize is just how diverse USDA is, and I think it's helpful for you to have that context as we are thinking about the role of this department in the response around nutrition security. So that diversity is both with respect to our mission and our geographic diversity. So our portfolio curbs hunger and poverty, which is the lane that brings us all together today. It also makes credit available for rural development, which is where 1/5 of Americans live. It stabilizes domestic farm income. It ensures the quality of the food supply, develops markets for agriculture, and conserves and protects natural resources, largely through fire, farm, and fork. And so we have approximately 100,000 employees, making us one of the largest federal departments, and 90% of our employees live outside the National Capital Region, which is atypical among other federal departments. Now, when I was in the COVID lane, I had the opportunity to learn all sorts of fun facts about USDA, and so let me just share a couple of them with you before jumping into our actions. So we are among the top 10 banks in the US in terms of lending. We have 192 million acres of forest, which includes public and private land, and we have the largest firefighting force in the world and the 6th largest air force in the world. Now, a core part of our mission is delivering a suite of more than 15 nutrition assistance programs, which together serve 1 in 4 Americans over the course of a year. This includes the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which you may know as SNAP, formerly called Food Stamps, which reaches 41 million Americans each month, the School Breakfast and Lunch Programs, which reach 30 million children each school day. We also reach nearly half of all infants in the United States through WIC, the Women, Infants, and Children Program, and that's at about 99,000 schools and about 250,000 retailers. In fiscal year 22, the nutrition assistance programs at USDA totaled $163 billion. Now, traditionally, they represent about 70% of our budget, but due to the COVID flexibilities and authorities from Congress, they are even in higher percentage now. Now, in addition to our nutrition assistance programs, we also invest more than $1 billion each year in nutrition education and promotion, and that's across all of our programs. We also translate the dietary guidelines for Americans through MyPlate, which I'm guessing all of you know well, and through broader investment in research and food systems. And these are just some of the things that we have going on. If you want to learn more, I really encourage you to have a look at a report that we put out in mid-March, sort of going through all the actions that we're doing around nutrition security. We also have the nutrition security webpage at USDA, which is updated regularly and lays out all these different actions. So to guide us toward nutrition security, that report that I mentioned laid out 4 pillars which serve as the architecture for all this work. So the first is providing meaningful nutrition support from pregnancy to birth and beyond. The second is connecting all Americans with healthy, safe, and affordable food. The third is developing, translating, and enacting nutrition science through partnership. And the fourth is prioritizing equity every step of the way. I want to emphasize that this work is driven by research, it is grounded in science, it is woven into our policies, and it informs each of our decisions. And most importantly, It impacts every life that we touch. Now, I do also want to point out that so much of our work is driven by lived experiences of our staff, of our stakeholders, and that actually includes me. So I grew up in inner city Baltimore. I have a twin sister. I have an older brother. My parents were both public school teachers. When we were little, my mom stepped out of the workforce to take care of us when we were young. And so we received WIC for a period, we received school meals for a period, and we also received what was then called food stamps for a period. Now, one thing that you all may have heard about is that the president recently announced the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health. And one of the things that conference is looking to do is to gather stories of people from all around the country. And so as part of the lead up to the conference, there's going to be lots of opportunities to engage and lean in. So for those of you who are interested, I just want to highlight the 3 key ways that you can lean in right now. One is through the regional listening sessions, which are happening through the middle of this month, so through mid-June. The second is through the conference website, which gives you the opportunity to submit stories or reflections. And then the third is through the partner-led toolkit, which was posted a couple of weeks ago. And that is designed to help you have conversations with your community, other organizations, and individuals about ending hunger, improving nutrition, increasing physical activity, all while reducing disparities. So hopefully some of the discussions that happen here at Menus of Change can be aggregated and submitted through that portal so your perspectives get reflected in the content that gets aggregated for the conference. Now I want to take just a few minutes and run you through those 4 pillars that I mentioned and give you an example of some of the work that we're doing in each. So for this first pillar, meaningful support, I want to focus on that bullet that on the right-hand side, ensuring benefits are adequate to support healthy eating patterns. All of these bullets have subcomponents within them. And so an example of how we are ensuring that benefits are adequate is through our reevaluation of the Thrifty Food Plan. This happened last year. The Thrifty Food Plan serves as the basis for calculating the size of the SNAP benefit. Through this reevaluation, the monthly SNAP benefit increased by 21%, or $36 per person per month. This was hugely significant. It was the first time in over 4 decades that there was a permanent increase in the Thrifty. And what that does is it puts healthy food within reach. And we view SNAP as one of the most effective ways that we can promote nutrition security through the arsenal of programs that we have at USDA. The next pillar is healthy food. And here I want to focus on that middle bullet, which is using incentive programs to promote healthy eating. So here a really good example is the Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program, also known as GusNIP. And so in the year 2 report, which came out a few months ago, what they found is that participants redeemed nearly $20 million of nutrition incentives. And they also increased their fruit and vegetable intake, and they increased their nutrition, or they increased their food security. And then about 2 weeks ago, as part of the Secretary's announcement about the framework for food system transformation, an additional $40 million was given to GusNIP to support additional projects, and that funding is coming through the American Rescue Plan Act. Now, the third pillar is collaborative action. It's got those 4 different pillars underneath of it, and where I want to focus is on translating and the latest dietary guidelines into information that consumers can use. And so, as you probably know, the dietary guidelines for Americans come out every 5 years. It's a process co-led by HHS and USDA. This year, HHS has the lead. So the next edition of the dietary guidelines will be coming out in 2030. So hopefully you saw the posting of the scientific questions, which closed for public comment in the middle of May. Just today, there was an announcement that hopefully you saw that we are accepting nominations for the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. That will be open for a month. Strongly encourage you to either apply, or if you know people who are interested, to encourage them to apply, or to reach out if you have questions about how to become a part of the committee. Now, the fourth and final pillar is equitable systems. And here I want to focus on the first one, strengthening support to Native American tribal school food programs. So one example here is through USDA's Office of Tribal Relations, where they recently launched the Indigenous Food Sovereignty Initiative, which promotes traditional foodways, Indian country food and agricultural markets, and indigenous health through foods that are tailored to American Indian and Alaskan Native dietary needs. Do also want to point out that as we think about equity, the programs, which we view as very powerful tools, are not fully subscribed. So if you look at data coming out of USDA for fiscal year 2019, what it shows is that 1 in 5 individuals eligible for SNAP are not participating. Now, the caveat there is the vast majority of SNAP benefits are redeemed. So what that tells you is that these are small benefits that people are leaving on the table. But still, these are funds that people could use, and we want to maximize participation in these programs. The second key program to mention is WIC. That's Women, Infants, and Children. 1 in 2 people eligible for WIC do not participate. Now, we have a large sum of funds through the American Rescue Plan Act to modernize and innovate around WIC, which will include outreach to try to promote participation and retention in the program. But it's a really critical area of focus because WIC is such a strong public health program. This is an area where we are looking for partners to help us think about creative ways to really boost participation in the program. And many of you probably have exposure to that exact population. Oops. Now, to execute on the Secretary's vision around nutrition security, we've been following a 2-phase approach. The first phase is really just external communications, getting the word out, what we're trying to do right now. That included that report that I mentioned. There was a really important address that the Secretary gave in mid-March in New York City at Teachers College. And now what we're really trying to do is think strategically about future investments and trying to really clearly define our lane to make it clear where others can step in and provide complementary value. So one of the things that I hope we can talk about tomorrow during this session is what are some of the intersections between menus of change and the work that we're doing at USDA. Do also want to point out that in addition to the actions that are underway, there's a whole lot of other stuff that's coming in the pipeline. So we did that historic update to the Thrifty Food Plan, and then separately, we'll be doing updates for Alaska and Hawaii. We are updating the WIC food package with science-informed changes. We are updating school meal standards. We are launching tribally led nutrition initiatives. As I mentioned, we are initiating the next iteration of the dietary guidelines, and we are also restructuring SNAP-Ed, a program which I'm guessing many of you are very familiar with. Do also want to mention that the President's fiscal year 23 budget includes transformational changes that are going to support the nutrition assistance programs that we've been talking about. And I'm really excited to say that it also includes a line item for nutrition security. It's a proposed $23 million, and it's meant to really further the work to promote and elevate nutrition security and working within the existing program structure. So we're keeping our fingers crossed for those funds. Now, I want to wrap by leaving you with 3 concluding thoughts. The first is that now is the time to lean in. Food insecurity is high. Diet-related conditions are high, and diet-related conditions are rising because of the pandemic. We also know that food insecurity and diet-related conditions disproportionately impact historically underserved populations. The second point is that building the evidence base and translating research into action plays an invaluable role in our department's ability to not just provide all Americans with access to safe, nutritious, and affordable food, but to help them understand how to prepare it on a limited budget and facilitate consumption across a range of life stages and food preferences. And then finally, and this is probably my most important message to all of you, yes, at USDA, we are investing tens of billions of dollars toward executing toward nutrition security, but we cannot do this alone. We do not have the resources to solve the problems of diet-related diseases and disparities. So we are looking for ways that partners can lean in and help us and think about where are the intersections, for example, with My Plate, where are the intersections with SNAP education, where are the intersections with team nutrition. So really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you today. Please grab me during the cocktail hour if you want to just chat about different ideas, and look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sara. Incredibly important work, and we are very indebted to you for coming here to tell us about it. And Sara will be, as you know, participating in one of the breakout sessions tomorrow. We will now be joined by Walter Willett, who's the professor of epidemiology and nutrition at the Harvard Chan School, a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. He studied food science at Michigan State and graduated from the University of Michigan Medical School before obtaining a doctorate in public health from Harvard. He has focused much of his work on the development of methods to study the effects of diet on the occurrence of major disease. Think about this. For the past 42 years, he has applied these methods in the nurses, health Studies 1 and 2, and the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study. Together, these cohorts include nearly 300,000 men and women with repeated dietary assessments and are providing the most detailed information on the long-term health consequences of food choices. And I'm sure all of you have seen newspaper articles or read in journals about the outcomes of these studies. He has published over 2,000 articles, primarily on lifestyle risk factors for heart disease and cancer, and has authored the textbook Nutritional Epidemiology and 4 books for the general public: Eat, Drink, and Be Healthy, which is a bestseller, Eat, Drink, and Weigh Less, The Fertility Diet, and Thinfluence. Walter is among the top 3 most cited persons in all areas of science. He's a member of the National Academy of Medicine and the recipient of many national and international awards for his research. However, Walter's wife tested positive this morning for COVID, which is a very popular thing to do these days. So Walter could not join in person, but recorded this morning his remarks for you.
Good afternoon. This is Walter Willett speaking, and I was hoping this morning to come be on my way to Hyde Park, but unfortunately, it turned out this morning that we have COVID in the family. So I'm going to be joining you virtually today. Hoping to see you soon. It looks like it'll be next year, though. Today, I'm going to talk very briefly about food, health, and the climate change crisis and the case for accelerating change. As we've talked about in other meetings at Menus of Change, probably the most conspicuous challenge we have on the nutrition front is the unrelenting epidemic of obesity. Here, we're at about 42% prevalence of obesity in adults in America, and that's up from about 10% if we look back at 1970. This is having consequences on the COVID epidemic. We have known for a long time, of course, there are many other consequences for diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and other outcomes. But the life expectancy had been going down about 4 years before the COVID epidemic, probably largely due to the complications of the obesity epidemic. But then we had a sudden downturn. And the averages don't tell the story because there are huge disparities. On average, America lost about 1 year of life expectancy, but this is about 5 years of projected life expectancy lost in the Latino population and about 3 years of projected life expectancy lost in the Black American population. If we look at the relationship between nutrition-related factors and severe COVID disease, specifically hospitalizations, we see about 32% of the hospitalizations could have been avoided if we didn't have overweight and obesity. About 20% could have been avoided if we had not had the prevalence of type 2 diabetes that we have. And all of these nutrition-related factors add up to over 50% of severe COVID hospitalizations could have been potentially avoided without these cardiometabolic complications. Unfortunately, we've entered what seems to be an overweight obesity death spiral. We've had the unrelenting weight gain that's leading to increased cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, many cancers are the result of obesity, arthritis, and this list goes on. Because of these complications, it's hard to be more physically active, and physical activity goes down. Television watching time goes up. That's related to increased junk food. And of course, all the way along, we have aggressive marketing of unhealthy foods, all of that leading to more weight gain. And the spiral continues, leading to more cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, and arthritis, and then finally, premature death. On the environmental side, the picture, in fact, is even more alarming. We've had this increase in global temperature over a number of decades, but the disconcerting point is that this is not linear and it's accelerating. These are average global temperatures measured by 3 different centers monitoring global temperature. The consequence is, again, a vicious circle where temperatures are increasing. That leads to ecological changes like permafrost melting, Arctic ice cap shrinking, air conditioning increases, leading to more use of fossil fuels. All of these factors generate more methane, and other greenhouse gases. Temperatures increase, and the cycle goes on. And this was the basis of an unprecedented publication last fall by major medical journal editors. This was published in more than 200 medical journals worldwide, and the editors warned of catastrophic harm to health that will be impossible to reverse. And that's the really worrisome part about this. Even if it takes 50 or 100 years, we can potentially reverse the obesity epidemic. We hope we'll do it sooner. But these environmental changes, severe damage to Earth's systems can be irreversible. And of course, that's the basis of the tremendous anxiety and depression among our younger generations when they literally see their future going up in flames. This is very much linked to what we're talking about at Menus of Change. We've shown graphs something like this, but just as a reminder, for red meat consumption, there's about 140 times greater greenhouse gas emissions per serving compared to serving of soy, other legumes, and most fruits and vegetables and cereal products. Pork, chicken, fish, dairy foods, eggs have quite a bit less greenhouse gas emissions per serving compared to red meat, but these are still 30 to 40 times greater per serving than plant protein sources. We do know how to deal with this, and that means shifting to a more plant-forward, what might be called flexitarian type diet. And the Canadian Food Guide now has done this. This is a beautiful new plate, fits very nicely with the flexitarian type of diet that we're talking about. Instead of milk being up here, there's a glass of water. Dairy is considered as one of the protein sources, along with some meat, eggs, and poultry, but mostly they demonstrate here plant protein sources, along with whole grains and, of course, fruits and vegetables. But our Department of Agriculture in the United States is not recommending this type of diet. In fact, the recommended amounts of meats, poultry, and eggs are about 5 times greater than the recommendations for nuts, seeds, and soy protein. So basically, the Department of Agriculture is recommending business as usual when we know this is not optimal for human health or for planetary health. There are multiple issues with the current U.S. dietary guidelines. High dairy consumption, 3 servings a day, is never justified by health outcomes. Again, the department recommends a diet high in meat, eggs, dairy, and foods, about 5 servings a day. And the Mediterranean and vegetarian dietary patterns, which were recommended by the Scientific Advisory Committee, were ignored. Also, the recommendations include an increase in starchy vegetables, which is the last thing that we need in the middle of an obesity epidemic. And of course, most seriously, our dietary guidelines are completely silent on environmental impacts of the dietary recommendations. So the reality is that our dietary guidelines are seriously corrupted and are neither optimally healthy nor sustainable. Again, we do know what to do about this, and we need look no farther than many of the traditional diets around the world. This is the Mediterranean diet, mostly plant-based, as we've talked about in many sessions, but in fact, many traditional diets fit this flexitarian plant-forward pattern. This is a traditional Vietnamese dish table, although we do put here some brown rice instead of white rice. There's definitely some tweaks that we should be doing. This is a traditional West African meal. This is a wonderful dish of peanut stew and sweet potatoes, wonderful seasonings. That plus greens that are present almost universally in African meals. That combination alone would make a healthy meal. If one wants, one can add some modest amounts of fish or animal source proteins in similar patterns here in a Costa Rican diet, different flavors, different foods, but same pattern. And of course, that list can go on with examples. I did want to take just a minute here and put our food system and greenhouse gas emissions from the food system in context, because I think this is really important. This is the greenhouse emissions pathway by the International Panel on Climate Change to avoid in global temperature for somewhere around 3 to 4 degrees centigrade increase, which would be disastrous to future generations. It's clear that at the moment, most of the greenhouse gas emissions do come from energy production, industry, buildings, and transportation sectors. Food is not the greatest contributor, although the energy and electricity from food production is counted in these other sectors, so it's really a bit larger. But it's clear we need to stop fossil fuel consumption and their greenhouse gas emissions as quickly as possible and nearly eliminate them by 2050. If we go on our business as usual pathway from the food system, will be about double the sustainable amount of greenhouse gas emissions from the food system. But if we switch to a flexitarian type diet, as we recommended in the Eat Lancet Commission, we could stay within planetary boundaries for greenhouse gas emissions. But one area where we've given less attention is the negative emissions. This means carbon capture or sequestration that the IPCC assumes we'll get from the food sector and agricultural sector, but nobody actually really knows how we're going to do this. And we know some ways to reduce and actually get to negative emissions. This is the area of regenerative agriculture and what's being called nature positive food systems. But we do need to pay attention to how we produce our food, and going forward, we'll be giving that much more attention. Clearly, much more research needs to be done to know how to do this. So a quick list of takeaways here. America's poor quality diets are having severe and growing consequences. Our food system is on track for planetary disaster. Healthy, sustainable, delicious, and affordable plant-forward diets are possible, and we actually know how to do that. National leadership in food policy is compromised by agroeconomic interests. State, local, and private sector leadership is critically important, especially because of the lack of national leadership. And with your creativity, leadership, and perseverance, we can immediately enhance the well-being of Americans and pass on to our future generations a viable planet. But this is going to take the work of everyone here and virtually everyone else if we're going to achieve this goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter, and we hope your wife does well and that you, in turn, as a fellow resident of your house, do not contract it, and if you do, that it's mild. So we're now joined by Matthew Raiford, who is the chef owner and sixth-generation farmer at Gilliard Farms, a sibling-run sustainable farm in Brunswick, Georgia, that has been owned and operated by his family since 1874. He's the author of Breast and Nyam and is a descendant of the freshwater Gullah Geechee, which is what his cookbook is based on. He has a culinary arts degree from this very school, the CIA, here in Hyde Park, and a certificate in ecological horticulture from the University of California, Santa Cruz, and the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems. Trained in classic French cuisine, which would be here, and with an affinity for coastal flavors, Matthew has over 25 years of experience in the food and hospitality industry, including serving as the director of culinary at the College of Coastal Georgia and the executive chef of Little St. Simon's Island and Halt Catering in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. House of Representatives. He was named the 2018 semifinalist in the James Beard Awards Best Chef in the Southeast category, and has been featured in the New York Times, Southern Living, Garden and Gun, and the Huffington Post, and has been a featured chef at food festivals across the country. Please welcome Matthew Raiford.
Hello. Hello, can everybody hear me? Good, because I didn't want to stand behind a podium, sorry. First of all, thank you all for having me here. Thank you for the Means of Change and all those that took their time to put all of this together. And thank you, Michael, for that introduction. For me, when I start to think about sustainability and being a past graduate from here, being a farmer, being a father, being a husband, trying to be a good human, it's a lot to take in for one person, don't you think? It's a lot, right? And so how does one person make a deal out of all the things that we just got finished seeing? How do we band together, figure out how to make these various things happen? So I'm big into stories. I think that people can grasp stories. I can grasp stories a lot quicker than someone just giving me a bunch of information and just throwing it out, because you can feel yourself inside the stories I'm getting ready to give. First, we'll talk about COVID-19. It was an amazing thing that got us all to become a little more familiar within our families that we really hadn't been familiar with. Some of you are thinking, no, that isn't what I really wanted to happen, but it did. But at that same token, we all of a sudden had a paper towel shortage. We had a toilet paper shortage. And then now we've had all kinds of shortages that you can possibly imagine. Well, when you think about all those things, think about, did anybody's grocery store run out of eggs during the pandemic? Like completely out of eggs, milk, anything? Did they run out of anything? Oh, y'all lived in good neighborhoods. Y'all don't have to worry about any of that. So y'all got the Amazon Prime that drops it in front of the house, correct? Is that what's going on? Well, there were a lot of places across the country that suffered greatly. And within where we lived, there were 27 farmers that did a little bit of everything that decided to band together to figure out a way to feed people across a 3.5-hour span. So roughly about 150 miles, maybe 200 miles, depending on how fast you're going. What these 27 farmers decided to do in 2020 was to first not all grow the exact same thing. So if you're growing carrots right here, this little group right here grows tomatoes, no carrots. This group right here decides that they're gonna grow squash, no carrots, no tomatoes. You follow me, right? Because it didn't make any sense for all of them to try to grow these amazing carrots and not have all the other things to be able to eat. It also is not sustainable, is it? If everybody grows carrots and nobody else is growing some of the other things because everybody just wants to grow carrots. So with them having that kind of conversation and bonding, they were able to create a sustainable food system that is now going into its 3rd year of operation, of which they all have increased their earning potential by $30,000 per farm. Now, for some of you, that might not be a lot, but how many farmers do I have in the room? 1. So that's a little sad, I want you to understand, because there's no way that we're going to be able to create a healthy, sustainable food system without the people that grow the food. That's the reason I'm starting off talking about farmers, because within this, how many chefs do we have in here? Yep, none of y'all can cook if I don't grow. Is that not a reality, right? How many of you run food programs? Yeah, see, you too can't do anything to help anybody if somebody does not grow the food. So it's great to pontificate about all the things that go on, but you're gonna tell me that inside this room right now, I only have how many farmers? 1, 2, oh, wait, 3. So somebody decided like, oh yeah, I better raise my hand too. But 3 out of this big room, we have to really think about that. Who are we inviting to have the conversation at the table with? Without farmers, there's nothing any of you can do with food. As a matter of fact, how many seed savers do I have in this room? Yep, about the same amount as we have farmers. So how's the biodiversity gonna keep going? All the things we need that we keep asking about, we do not, or we continuously do not bring the people to the table that are gonna actually do the thing for you. Doesn't that give us pause, right? Gives us something to start thinking about. Like, how can you have a job without the farmer, without the soil? Because those greenhouse emissions that keep going, all the things that end up in processed foods, the reason that we're at that point is because we never invite the farmer to the table and have a conversation with them. And when we do, it's usually a little too late, right? Think about all the things that we've learned about farming through academia that has never been shared with the farmer. Like, we've been knowing we need to compost and get rid of, and the reason I'm doing this is so I can see when those hands and those heads nod, because so much light is coming in my face right now. But see, if we don't have those conversations and get in front of that soil, have a conversation about what's going into the soil, about what seeds to save for biodiversity, about how things grow seasonally. Because see, we want avocado every day, right? Don't we? Avocado wasn't even a thing until way into the 90s, way after I graduated from school here. Really, it only became a thing because of a Super Bowl commercial. Now, according to this past Super Bowl, 150 million pounds of avocado was eaten on that one day. So we as Americans are consuming a lot of stuff and still not bringing the people that are creating the things and finding out what's actually happening on the ground. So now we got to start also thinking about how do we think globally and act locally? Because the only way things also stay, see that word that's right there in the middle, sustainable, is if we think past ourselves. So you got to be thinking about the next generation. That's sustainable. Okay? Sustainable is not for all of you to be able to just live to the ripe old age of that big number that was up there. Sustainable means that the next generation that's coming behind you has an opportunity. You remember that conversation at the very beginning about the pear or about the tree? Like if the time to plant a tree was yesterday? The real proverb goes more like a man or woman does not plant an orchard for themselves, they plant it for their children's children's children. So everything that we do, everything that we take in over the next couple of days that has to do with being sustainable and getting delicious, healthy, and nutritious food, we have to start with the farmer. We have to start with the seed. We have to understand whatever we create when we leave from here has to go at least 3 more generations. So don't think about 2023. So if you are 50 now, you need to be thinking about what's going to happen when you're 65. Okay? If you're 40 right now in this room, you need to be thinking about, am I going to make it to 65? Think about what's all happening in the world right now. Okay? If you are in your 20s and 30s, am I going to make it to 55? Notice I only gave everybody about 25 more years to keep it moving, right? Because if we're not thinking sustainably and just thinking about ourselves, that's what we got left. About 25 good years. So while we're doing this on a regular basis, let's make sure that we keep the right people within those circles. And that we also continue to go back and have the conversation with those 27 farmers. How can we help? What's the next thing that you need? Oh, what does the USDA have available for you? Because I have been back home 12 years pounding the ground, and I just learned more today about what the USDA does in the 15 minutes up here than I had for the last 12 years actually farming, going to the USDA, going to NRCS offices. You all understand where I'm going with this, right? So now that I've learned something, it's my responsibility as a human being to go out and have the conversation with more people. Is that why we're all here, right? So we can grow, so we can become better, so that things can become more sustainable. So oftentimes I go to conferences and I'm like, oh my God, I'm really not gonna learn anything that I don't already know. I will tell you this, no matter what conference you ever go to, you need to connect with one person. How many of you in here are sitting next to someone you know? Yeah. Yeah. This is always my challenge at conferences. You should disconnect with that person you came with. Because that person when you came with, 9 times out of 10 has the exact same values that you have. Why don't you start finding out what the rest of the world's thinking, right? Because your little clique might get blown up. We just saw what happened with COVID-19, right? Everybody was all cliquish, and then all of a sudden it was like, girl, I ain't seen you in forever. I'm telling y'all, that's not gonna stop, right? We just had proof of it just a second ago, right? Things aren't slowing down, it's just happening, and now it's become our new norm. So start meeting other people so you can figure out this thing from I'm thinking globally within this group, but I need to take this back to my local area. I hope I'm connecting all the dots for everyone. Everyone's kind of seeing where this goes. Has anyone ever put a seed in the ground before? See, maybe I should have started off with that. So basically everybody in here knows how to plant, right? At least, because all the hands kind of went up, right? You know how when you put that seed in, how there's some time that goes in before it becomes a pepper or a tomato, right? And you have to, what are all the things? I want someone to just shout out, what are all the things you have to do to that, let's say tomato plant. Is everybody okay with a tomato plant? Okay, so let's say a tomato plant. I plant a tomato plant, a seed today. Somebody yell out one of the things we have to do. Absolutely, what else? Give it sunlight, yes, what else? Good soil, right? Thank you for not saying dirt. Dirt is what connects underneath your fingernails. Soil is what we take care of. It is a living organism, okay? So let's say we go through that little tomato and do that every day, right? Anybody know how long the tomato takes before it starts to flower and give fruit? Roughly. Somebody throw out a time. That's a little too, how many? 60? Close to the 60-ish, 75, 85, 90 days, depending on the tomato varietal. But what do you have to do every day to get that little tomato to have fruit? Still got to tend to it, right? So everyone that's here, whatever the reason that you are here, know that whatever the goal was, this is where you are. Okay? You are just the seed right now. And it's going to take time before you get fruit. If you think that you are going to walk out of here and solve the world's problems, I will tell you, you have started at the wrong place at the wrong time. You need to think of today as being the first day you put the seed in the soil, and that it's going to take time and continuous nourishment. I notice none of you said, well, we can just stop after we plant it. Nobody said that, right? So whatever we get going here, it's going to take time for it to come to fruition. It's going to take time for it to get so big and so juicy that you can just bite into it and it just happens. That means that everybody is on the same level playing field. When all of us can eat from that tomato plant and all of us understand the amount of time it's going to take if we just start today to get to that next level. It's not going to happen overnight. And we have to do our due diligence with everybody that's within the food chain to make it work. Thank you all for your time, and I look forward to seeing everybody later.
Wise words, Matthew, very wise words. So our final presenter for this general session is Emily Leib, who is clinical professor of law and faculty director of the Harvard Law School Food Law and Policy Clinic, the nation's first law school clinic devoted to providing legal and policy solutions to the health, economic, and environmental challenges facing our food system. Working directly with clients and communities globally, Emily champions community-led food system change, reduction in food waste, access to healthy food, and equity and sustainability in food production. Her scholarly work has been published in the California Law Review, the Wisconsin Law Review, the Harvard Law and Policy Review, the Food and Drug Law Journal, and the Journal of Food Law and Policy, among others. She received her undergraduate degree in American History from Columbia and her JD from Harvard Law School. Emily, welcome.
All right. Thank you. I'm so glad that we had Matthew up here kind of getting everyone active again. So it was a really nice warm-up. Thank you to Matthew. So I'm going to take us in a kind of different direction. As you heard, I focus on law and policy, so I'm going to talk kind of about policy trends. But I first want to just thank Menus of Change for having me. I spoke at a very early Menus of Change conference, I think maybe one of the first ones at Harvard, and it was a much smaller room, so it's just really heartening to see how many people are here and focusing on these things. All right. There we go. So just to explain a little bit about what I do, you heard a little bit about my bio, but what does it mean to be a lawyer working in this space, and what is a law school clinic? So I teach students in the classroom about the laws that regulate the food system, and it's actually a pretty wide-ranging set of laws, as I'll get into a little bit. We talk about everything from the laws around planting of food, around environmental stewardship, food safety, labeling, consumption, health, all of those aspects. But then the bulk of my work is actually with students doing hands-on projects for clients who are community groups, nonprofits, government agencies, and as you heard, both here in the US, and we're doing some global work too, which I'll mention a little bit, particularly on food donation and recovery, which is now in 23 different countries. So students are getting these hands-on opportunity, but we're also doing real work for clients and really learning a lot about the issues, helping them better understand the law, and then develop policy solutions to make the laws better for the food system. So I'm going to start with kind of a primer on where laws regulating the food system come from. It's actually really complex, which can be both exciting because there are lots of avenues for innovation, but also can make your head spin a little bit because they're not very coordinated and they can be coming from lots of different sectors. So there's food law can come from everything from the global level. There are things, trade agreements. There's a global set of standards on food safety called Codex Alimentarius, all the way down to the very local level of the institution or organization. So I actually got started working on food policy from work I did after law school in rural Mississippi. And in some of the towns where I was working, the decisions of institutions like schools or hospitals made a much bigger impact on the food system than any policy set in the state house or the federal government. So policies can be really set at all of these levels. And drilling down into the levels at the different levels of government in the U.S., just a little primer on this. One thing that's really interesting now that I'm kind of seeing this even more globally is that in the U.S., we're really unique in that food can be regulated at different levels of government. So in a lot of other countries, it might be that it's a federal government responsibility and states merely implement that federal law. In other countries, the federal government doesn't have any role in food, and it's really up to states to do all of the regulating. Here, we make it really complicated, and there are actually ways that every level of government can play a role. So under the U.S. Constitution, our federal government actually has limited authorities, which I know sounds really strange, but it really does. It can only act in the ways that the Constitution has laid out. All other powers go to the states. The primary way that this plays out in the food system is that the federal government has the right to control interstate commerce. And today, a lot of our food travels in interstate commerce. So the federal government can regulate that food if it wants to. It obviously, when it's spending its own money, it can also tell people how that should be spent. So the U.S. Farm Bill, which is a big piece of legislation enacted about every 5 years, gives nearly over $400 billion worth of allocations to mainly USDA. The federal government can say, we're spending the money, we want to tell you how it should be spent. But actually in our system, the states have the most power over the food system, and that's because they can act when the federal government doesn't have authority, like on food that's only traveling within the state. This comes into play often with waste management, which I do some work on as well. Anything that's really at the state level, they have power over. States also have the authority if there's someplace the federal government could act, but they have not yet acted. So as an example, calorie labeling on menus was a state and local policy before the federal government enacted it. So the federal government could have done it, but until they did, states and cities had free rein to do what they wanted. And states can also exceed a floor if the federal government sets one, which is very common. And lastly, at the local level, local governments are nowhere mentioned in the Constitution, which means that they don't have any general powers, but they have whatever power the state that they're in gives them. And most commonly, states, even though they really vary in what they allow local government to do, most commonly they give local government the power over zoning, which means that local governments can say what is a residential area, what is a business area, and then what can happen in those places, like can you grow food, can you sell food in these different areas. One more thing to say that makes this even more complicated is that at each one of those levels of government, there's no single food agency. There are multiple different decision makers, and this is what leads to really, sometimes a lack of coordination, which I'll kind of come back to at the end of my talk. But at the federal government alone, there are 15 different agencies, as well as Congress, that are setting policies around the food system. And often really they each have their hammer and they're looking for their nail, and they're not necessarily coordinated all the time. So I want to skip a few slides. So I'm going to talk about 3 trends that I'm seeing in terms of law and policy in this space. There are so many, but I wanted to highlight a couple that I think are really timely and interesting and what I'm seeing really heat up. One is on food waste reduction, which is one of the biggest areas that I spend my time working on. So I like to start with this perspective because it really shows a couple things. So this shows the amount of food wasted, food loss and waste globally is about 1.3 billion tons a year. It's about a third of the food supply. And as you can see from this slide, it is a global phenomenon. So it's happening at all regions of the world. But the other thing you can see is that where in the chain food is lost is different from region to region. And so here in North America is the one region where our food waste, the orange circle, exceeds food loss, which is the blue circle. And that means that we're not losing most of our food on the farm and immediately post-harvest. We're doing all the work of like packaging that food, sending it across the country, and then a lot of it's being wasted at retail and at households. And just to follow up on that, this shows in the US where our food is wasted, and it's from our good friends at an organization called Raiford. So what you can see is that 37% of food waste, the largest amount is at households, which is really tricky to change because we have to change the habits of every single decision maker in their own homes. But actually, almost a third of the waste happens across restaurants, retail, and food service institutions. So there's also a lot of opportunity at all of those types of institutions to really be thoughtful about ordering decisions, donating surplus, otherwise recovering it and making sure it doesn't end up in a landfill. This has gotten increasing attention because of the impact on climate change, among other issues. There's a food security impact, there's an impact on use of other resources like water and land, but climate has driven a lot of countries to set national goals, and that's because the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change a couple years ago said food loss and waste accounts for 8 to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So a lot of countries have set goals to reduce food waste. So I want to talk a little bit about momentum in this space. This is just from the federal level. I have kind of recent proposed and enacted legislation. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I've worked on this topic now for more than a decade, and there are more bills working their way through Congress than we've ever seen. So all the ones that are in bold were introduced within the last 6 months. Things on standardizing date labels, making it easier to donate food, increasing the tax benefits for donating food. And I think a lot of this is because in the last U.S. Farm Bill, which was 2018, that was the first time that the federal government through Congress included legislation with funding and programming to reduce food waste. So a lot of these bills are kind of markers getting their way into Congress now to be on people's radar for the next Farm Bill, which is likely going to be in 2023. At the state level, we've also for years been tracking state legislation on this, and what we saw, this is from 2021 alone, there were 99 unique pieces of legislation introduced in states on food waste. 28 of those were enacted into law on a whole bunch of areas. A lot of them were on funding for infrastructure to reduce food waste. A number of bills were organic waste bans, which I'll talk about on the next slide. There were things at school food donation, compost awareness, a whole bunch of different bills. And you can see in blue at the bottom how many of these in different areas were enacted last year. And this is one of those trends. So there's a growing number of states and municipalities that have either food waste restrictions, so these are bans on sending more than a certain amount of food to the landfill, or donation requirements. So let me talk about what those both mean. In terms of a restriction, Massachusetts, where I live, has a restriction that businesses can't send more than a certain amount of food to the landfill per week. It's been in place since 2014. It used to be 1 ton per week, and they this year have decreased it to a half a ton. And that means that more and more businesses are subject to this restriction where they just need to find other things to do with their food so it doesn't end up in the landfill. In terms of donation requirements, California has been leading the charge, although just last year, Washington and New York passed similar laws that require the donation of edible food. And in California, to meet a statewide goal of that donation, CalRecycle is requiring all businesses to donate all edible food. There's tiers of businesses, but eventually all businesses will have to find all their edible food and make sure to donate it. There's so much more. There's been a lot going on. One thing, last year we put out a call to action with partner organizations, and we had signatories from more than 60 different businesses, private sector businesses, local government, NGOs, showing growing momentum. At the federal level, there's been an interagency collaboration with USDA along with FDA and EPA that continues to work on this. And then there are a number of businesses that are called 2030 champions who have committed publicly to reduce their food loss and waste by 50% by 2030. And just this year, I think 7 new businesses announced that they're part of this commitment. The next trend I want to talk about is state and local innovation. So I kind of started us off with some of that food waste state level legislation, but there's so much going on here. It was actually very hard to make slides because there's too much to discuss, but I'm going to talk about 3 main areas. One is in state and local sugar reduction policies. Last month, we published a toolkit that covered 6 different policy areas in terms of sugar reduction that come out of work we've been doing over the last few years, hands-on with city and state advocacy groups and public health departments. And there's 2 trends that I highlighted here. One is in terms of sugar-sweetened beverage taxes, which are enacted now in a lot of different local governments and have been introduced in a steadily increasing number of states, although no state has yet enacted one. And there's data showing that these really do decrease the amount of beverage consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages. One study from Dr. Bleich and others showed in Philadelphia a 26% decrease in consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages. So there's a lot of more interest in these. And I think also thinking about budget shortfalls coming out of COVID, there's some look at this as a way to both increase money and look at ways to really target that money towards the same communities that are really suffering from health equity concerns. Healthy default policies now are enacted in a number of cities and states, and these are policies that require food businesses to make water, or in some cases water or juice, the default beverage instead of soda or sugar-sweetened beverage. And again, customers can choose to opt into having the unhealthy beverage, but really putting in front of them the healthier one in the hope, and evidence shows that people will go with that default. On the environmental side, one of the biggest trends has been in states enacting healthy soils legislation. So actually the biggest takeaway is the bottom bullet on the slide, that there are now 20 states that have legislation on healthy soils. 10 of those 20 were enacted just last year. And these are kind of, there's a range of ways that these are implemented, but the idea is really incentivizing farmers to adopt proven healthy soils practices that help sequester carbon, improve soil mass, soil health, money, grants, and demonstration projects to try out new practices and see if those work, and then to help farmers get their soil tested so that there's better data on soil health. And then there's also been a trend in terms of state laws on food system equity. So I'm highlighting 2 here. There are so many more. A big one that passed last year in Colorado was a Farm Worker Bill of Rights, which has been now looked at as a model by a lot of other states. The idea for this is that farm workers are exempt from a lot of protections that apply to other workers, which is a real equity concern, especially when you think about that most farm workers are immigrants, people of color, migrant workers. So Colorado's law provides health and safety protections. It provides minimum wage and overtime for farm workers, which they were otherwise exempt from, and then protections for unions and organizing. So a lot of states are really looking at this because it has a lot embedded within it. And then another is the Good Food Purchasing Program, which many of you in food service may be familiar with. A growing number of cities have adopted this, and it's a values-based procurement system, which you can see on the slide the 5 different values that are embedded in it. And the goal is really to get a baseline and then improve the food being procured on all 5 of those areas. In Los Angeles School District, which was the first adopter, they found in 2 years of the Good Food Purchasing Program an increase from 9% to 75% of the fruits and vegetables were local. So I'm going to actually, there's a bunch of others, investments in Vermont, huge $1.3 billion investment in California across the food system. And then this one, which I'm happy to talk more about at some later point, it's a personal project of mine, but states really increasing the food that can be sold from home kitchens. Again, many states looking at this as an equity response to COVID and thinking about lots of people stuck at home that often have had, skill in cooking. And so a growing number of states have allowed the sales of food from home more than ever before. So lastly, I want to talk a little bit back on coordination. So if you remember back, I mentioned there are more than 15 different agencies at the federal level alone that have a role to play in regulating the food system. And they're all kind of, there's some places where they're intersection and working together, but a lot of times they're in their silos. In 2017, we did a big study on this with partners at Vermont Law School, and we really looked at the opportunities for creating a national food strategy. So we looked at food strategies in 6 other countries, peer countries, where they really brought together a whole of government approach and created a strategy. We looked at a handful of US states, and then we looked at other strategies in the US that aren't on food but are on other topics, like there's a national strategy on HIV/AIDS, a national strategy on environmental justice. And we said that the US food system could really benefit from having a coordinated strategic framework for agencies and Congress to really think about and look back to certain goals. In the interim, our partners across the pond in the EU have put out the Farm to Fork strategy, which is really very much does this in every area of the food system. They've set out different targets and goals and have timelines of how to meet those. So there's a goal to reduce pesticide use, and there's a timeline to set out a framework for that. A goal to set targets for each country on food loss and waste reduction with a timeline to reach that. There's a goal on harmonizing front-of-pack labeling to make it easier for consumers to choose healthy foods. So we're starting to see coordination pick up too. Just last year, there was the first ever UN Food Systems Summit, which was a food system-wide approach to really looking at a lot of these challenges. In the lead up to that, countries, including the US, held food system dialogues to really bring together stakeholders across the system and have this cross-cutting dialogue, having the farmers talk to the doctors, talk to the public health practitioners about this. I've been really excited about a resolution that I worked on actually with Dr. Willett and others that was passed in the House of Representatives last month that is calling on the medical education system and on the federal government to incorporate more education on diet into medical education. More than half of doctors before they go to medical school believe that diet is important for health, and more than half upon graduation believe that diet is not important for health. So it seems like there's a really big missed opportunity in bringing these two systems together, and Congress is pushing in that direction. And lastly, just hearkening back to Dr. Bleich's remark on the White House conference, which is really exciting. This is the first time in more than 50 years that the White House is having a conference on food. It's going to focus on hunger, nutrition, and health. But along with this, there's listening sessions, and there's going to be creation of a national strategy on those topics. So we're seeing movement towards this coordination and trying to do some strategic planning for the food system. Thank you so much for being here, for letting me talk about the thing that gets me really jazzed up, which is policy in the food system. And I look forward to meeting all of you and to having more discussion tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Emily. Well done. About 12 years ago, I chaired the board of the National Restaurant Association, and certainly the restaurant industry was subject to a lot of criticism. It still is about the question of nutrition. I had a quick study done of the number of medical schools that required courses on nutrition. And the answer was, as Emily alluded to, disappointingly very few, if any, viewed that as something that doctors should be required to be educated on. So we've had in this first general session 5 perspectives. Dean Williams set the stage. Then we had a wonderful talk from Sara about USDA and government policy, and that's being implemented. From Walter, a perspective on science. Then from Matthew, the perspective of a farmer, and Emily now just the law and public policy. So I think overall it has set the stage for our work together here at Menus of Change. It is now my pleasure to welcome for our next general session my co-chair of the Menus of Change Business Leadership Council, Siobhan Hansen. One could not ask for a more thoughtful, insightful, and distinguished colleague in our noble mission together. So Siobhan, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Michael. Very, very generous, and I feel the same about you. It's such a pleasure to serve with you. I want to welcome you to our second and final session today. Already, there have been amazing inputs and insights and things to think about. I just genuinely appreciate all of the contributions thus far. But we're going to move to a session called Minding Our Future and Your Brain, Healthy Aging, Food, and Lifestyle. I'm Siobhan Hansen. I'm responsible for food choice architecture and nutrition on the food team at Google. And as Michael said, I'm fortunate enough to be his co-chair for the Business Leadership Council for Menus of Change. It's my pleasure to introduce this session. First, just for a little bit of context, did you know that by the year 2050, it's estimated that the global population over the age of 65 will reach 1.6 billion, more than double the current estimate of 617 million people. To address the challenges and opportunities in promoting optimal health and high-functioning aging populations, the CIA and Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health joined with the association Montessori International to launch a multidisciplinary initiative called Minding Our Future, Healthy Aging, Food, and Lifestyle. In this session, Dr. Lillian Chung and Dr. Rudy Tanzi will summarize learnings from 2 virtual retreats held last year that brought together diverse expertise from a wide range of academic and professional disciplines to evaluate evidence and translational strategies at the intersection of food, nutrition, mindfulness, and experience design. Ultimately, and for this audience, we want to challenge food service operators to be aware and well-placed to collaborate in helping the world achieve healthy longevity. Through unique experiences to menu innovation and the mindful design of shared food experiences and environments, we'll start that journey today. First, and on stage, we'll have Dr. Lillian Chung. Lillian is a lecturer and director of health promotion and communication and director of mindfulness research and practice at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health's Department of Nutrition. Lillian's work focuses on the translation of science-based recommendations into public health communications and programs to promote healthy lifestyles for chronic disease prevention and control. Following Lillian, and via video, we'll have Dr. Rudy Tanzi, Director of Genetics and Aging Research Unit, co-director of the McCants Center for Brain Health, co-director of the Mass General Institute for Neurodegenerative Disease, and vice chair of neurology at Mass General Hospital, and the Joseph P. and Rose F. Kennedy Professor of Neurology at Harvard Medical School. We'll have presentations from both of our presenters, and then we'll have time for a very brief exchange with Lillian. Please welcome Lillian to the stage.
Thank you very much, Siobhan, for the introduction, and greetings to you all, dear friends. We launched Minding Our Future as we realize that the global demographics is shifting towards more people living longer than 65, and also globally there is a declining birth rates. So the vision of our project is to improve the health, productivity, and quality of life for the aging population worldwide while improving the health of our planet. And our objective in this one-year project is to create a roadmap to provide evidence and translational strategies to address challenges and opportunities in fostering optimal health among aging populations worldwide. We have an advisory committee consisting of 8 individuals from Europe, Asia, and America. And we had 2 think tanks. We were going to get together, but due to the pandemic, we can only do it over Zoom. That happened in June and September 2021, with altogether 20 thought leaders across the world, including not only nutritional science, but sensory science, culinary arts and strategies, mindfulness, the Montessori approach, health policy, epidemiology, neuroscience, and behavior science, as well as geriatrics. And last but not least, very importantly, the senior living operators. So we reviewed the scientific evidence along with practices that has been going on in 4 major areas: food and nutrition, and not only just talking about what to eat in terms of achieving optimal diets, but also a big emphasis on appetite and sensory science, because much is known as illustrated by Dr. Jean-Xavier Quinat's work from UC Davis, that after age 40, we start to decline in terms of our ability to smell, and then as well as our taste buds deteriorate. By the time we're 65, a lot of people no longer have the same ability to taste nor smell the food. So this is a really big challenge, and this is an area that I think a lot of you in the audience can really help. We also paid quite a bit of attention in terms of lifestyle aspects, in terms of physical activity, how different ways of staying active could help the body and the mind. And then there is a major focus on the practice of mindfulness and how it could be affecting the mood and function, the brain function of individuals. Last but not least, we also looked at the major chronic diseases that are common in aging, including obesity, diabetes, and hypertension, and the rate of cognitive decline and dementia, and what's known right now in terms of preventing and treating Alzheimer's disease. Our goal is really to increase the health span as one lives longer. What's the point of living longer when we were not functioning well, that we do not feel good about ourselves? So this is the whole goal of Minding Our Future, to be really pragmatic about not just the science, but its application. as you most likely is aware, that a lot is going on in the research in microbiome. And microbiome research and the billions of microbes in our system can affect very diverse conditions that involves the inflammatory diseases, including allergy, autism, atherosclerosis, autoimmune diseases, obesity, cancer, and more recently, the finding on aging. And recent research also found that chronic stress, which is really increasing during COVID, can cause increased inflammation that can actually accelerate the aging process. And so we really dived into the practice of mindfulness. And this area of research is pretty new. It's only a few decades old. It was not until John Kabat-Zinn in the late 1970s who started to have a mindfulness training program, an 8-week one, that it became a bit more popular. So what is mindfulness? It is the awareness that emerges through paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, to the unfolding of experience from moment to moment. So in the coaching and teaching of mindfulness practice, one is not only aware of what's going on in your body and your mind, but we are taught to how to regulate it when we are in a negative state. And it goes beyond just the self. It does recognize that we survive because we are interconnected to others. So there is a lot of awareness that we need to be thinking about the well-being of others as well as the well-being of our planet before we can achieve our optimal health. So there has been, in the recent 2 decades, a lot more research on mindfulness and how it affects the physiology as well as the brain. As a matter of fact, a very, very important breakthrough was done by Dr. Sara of Mass General Hospital. She had individuals who went through the 8-week mindfulness-based training course and found that, indeed, scanning the brain, there is an increase in the gray matter thickness in our brain that can actually affect our learning, our memory, and also emotional regulation. That was really quite amazing finding, which breaks away with now a lot more research on how mindfulness could be positively affecting our brain. And that's the reason why we would like to be including the practice of mindfulness in our aging research. And during the search of literature and getting to know some of the cutting-edge stuff, I found out actually a few years ago, the former NIH director, Francis Collins, and renowned opera singer, Renee Fleming, actually started an initiative at the National Institute of Aging, trying to understand how music can positively affect aging. So there is a lot of ongoing studies right now, and I recently heard some abstract presented about how choir, just even over Zoom, could be positively affecting the mental health of individuals. So we need to really move beyond our current system that is reactive. hyper-focus on individual organs and diseases, and towards a more system-based proactive treatment that emphasizes prevention. And additionally, as the science develops, we can look to move to more personalized and precision approaches, but currently is not really available for prime time, although the National Institute of Health is investing quite a bit on precision nutrition. So, Minding Our Future, as well as the very recently released report on from the National Academy of Medicine, takes a life course approach, a continuum that looks at aging as an outcome and all of the elements and exposures through one's life. So everything actually counts in affecting the way we are and how we are going to be aging. So every aspect of lifestyle is very important, including sleep and socializing with friends and connections with others. How is it this night? Okay. So in this initiative, what we are hoping to do is to mobilize all different sectors, not only the industry-based initiatives and their knowledge and skills, but also nonprofit organizations, as well as government-based programs. There is one very cutting-edge model that was just recently released from the Singapore government. It is a public-private partnership, and it is very exciting because it is addressing every aspect of our living, from housing to the individual behavior to ability of getting elderly to have more income and so forth. And this is a model to be watched, and obviously because Singapore is such a small country, it's easy to implement some of this public-private partnership, but definitely there is much to be learned about this. And there is a lot of focus on food that, and they don't have a whole lot of land. So they do a lot of urban farming, and they consider it as an activity that could be not just helping the person, but the whole community and the mental health and the interaction of different generations together. They also have community kitchens as well. And they even got technology going with what they call N-Buddy that could be tracking the diet, physical activity, and nudging behavior in a way that the elderly would not normally engage in. So, with the 2 retreats that we had, we will be publishing a scientific article to summarize our findings, as well as the Culinary Institute of America will be taking a lead in translating the scientific article to a much more user-friendly publication. Thank you very much for your attention, and this is a really exciting beginning and for our institutions. And now we are going to be having the video at the talk by Dr. Rudy Tensi. And unfortunately, he could not be with us, but he has a very, very interesting video that I think you will find very, very interesting.
So Alzheimer's, of course, is the most common form of dementia in the elderly. 6 million patients, very expensive. Risk factors: age number one, family history, head injury, and sex. Women make up 2/3 of Alzheimer's patients. After menopause, these dips in energy metabolism, the loss of estrogen seems to promote more neuroinflammation in female patients, so the disease proceeds faster. And if you look at the fastest growing segment of our population, which is over 85, well, right now lifespan is 80, and 30 to 40% of those over 85 already have symptoms, the early symptoms of Alzheimer's or full-blown Alzheimer's. So this is a pandemic, as Barron said, the other pandemic, and cases will triple by the middle of this century unless we figure out a way to get a handle on it. But I want to make this point, and this is what I'm going to get back to a lot. If you take how many cases are there pre-symptomatic? We should say asymptomatic cases. These are people who have pathology in their brains. They have plaques and tangles. We like to call them at the McCann Center the yellows. They're not quite green, meaning healthy. They're not quite red, meaning sick. But they have pathology in their brain, and they're at much higher risk. It's kind of like having high cholesterol, already having some atherosclerotic plaque in your arteries, and so you're on your way to heart disease with greater risk, but you're not there yet. If you take how many people in that category, 38 million people in this country. And the battleground is the hippocampus. Hippocampus is Greek for seahorse, because it looks, as you can see here, a lot like a seahorse. And it's in the hippocampus where, these otherwise meaningless sensory signals, photons hitting your eyes, acoustic waves hitting your ears, are converted into meaningful information. When an infant sees a red car, that's just a color red. They don't really call it color red. They can't, there's no meaning for what that car is. We learn over time to give meaning to sensory signals, and that becomes information. And then memory is recalling that information. And in Alzheimer's disease, the sensory signals come in, they get stored in the hippocampus, but increasingly they can't be converted into meaningful information. And so this leads to a dissolution of the connection with the world and oneself. And I want to make the point that, along the lines of mindfulness, is that, senior moments, as we call them, can simply come from lack of attention, just being jaded, being your bandwidth is too taken up, having fewer wow moments in life and more so what moments, been there, done that. And so some of what looks like Alzheimer's could just be lack of attention, and that could be corrected with some of the things we're talking about today, mindfulness. But in Alzheimer's disease, it is brain pathology. It's neurodegeneration that's causing this. And these are the main pathologies. Amyloid plaques occurring outside of neurons, neurofibrillary tangles inside, and the biggest killer, neuroinflammation. Every once in a while, you see resilient brains. This is where someone dies in their 80s or so, and they didn't have any Alzheimer's, no form of dementia, no cognitive problems. And the pathologist says, wait, this person has tons of plaques and tangles. This is an Alzheimer's patient. Go back and check the records. And what you see is that this person was cognitively fine. And every single time when you ask, how did they avoid dementia with all these plaques and tangles? They didn't get neuroinflammation. The match was lit, the brush fires were spreading, but somehow the brain stayed chilled out. You didn't get this cognitive decline because there was no cytokine storm. Just like COVID. COVID doesn't kill you, it induces a cytokine storm. And inflammation is what takes you out. Same thing here. The plaques and tangles kill enough neurons to trigger neuroinflammation, but without it, neurons survive, you don't get dementia. So this is really important. So the elephant in the room is that we think it's okay to not diagnose Alzheimer's disease until the brain has degenerated to the point of dysfunction, right? Imagine if we waited till you lost half your beta cells in your pancreas to say, okay, now you have diabetes. Okay, now we're going to treat you. Or we waited till you have congestive heart failure to manage cholesterol, right? In Alzheimer's, our cholesterol is amyloid, but you have to manage it early. We have to go from being reactive to being proactive, monitoring brain health, monitoring this pathology decades before symptoms, like we do with cholesterol, like we do with glucose and insulin, and treat this disease before the organs actually degenerated to the point of dysfunction. This is the paradigm shift that we need. So early prediction by family history and gene testing, that will tell you at what age you need to get early detection. And then most importantly, you need early intervention. What can we do to stave off Alzheimer's disease? What can we do to keep brain health now? And you've already heard 2 excellent talks about exercise and meditation, and they're all part of what we want to do at the McCann Center for Brain Health. And that is to determine the indicators of brain health and interventions that promote brain health, and then get these integrated into brain care. This is a center that I co-direct with Jonathan Rosen and Greg Frechon. But the bottom line of what we recommend is very in line with what this group is already talking about. Nothing new here, except the acronym SHIELD, right? So SHIELD is sleep, handling stress, interacting with others, exercise, staying actively, intellectually learning new things, and diet. Sleep, of course, is when you clean your brain of amyloid and other debris. So you need 7 to 8 hours of REM and deep sleep cycles. I call it mental floss. Interaction with others. Loneliness increases risk for Alzheimer's by 2-fold. But if you're alone and you like it, that's fine. But loneliness as a risk, as a stressor, increases risk. Exercise, we heard an excellent talk about exercise. I just want to mention that we published a paper in Science a year or so ago, an article where we showed in Alzheimer's transgenic mice, if we give them a running wheel, it's as good as any drug we've ever tried. So we say try for at least 150 minutes a week. I keep my recumbent bike here in my home office so I can jump on it when I can mute myself and turn off the video and jump on the bike. And what exercise does, among other things, is it increases blood flow to the brain, delivering, now we know that there are important nutrients that induce neurogenesis that come from the liver, also from the gut. So you got to induce blood flow to the brain to get important peripheral nutrients in that promote brain health. Learning new things is simple. If you make new synapses, that's more synapses that you can lose before you lose it. So, building up your synaptic reserve. I mean, at the end of the day, Alzheimer's correlates most with synapse loss. That's what those microglial cells are going to do, is remove synapses. So the more you make, the more you can more resilience you have. And finally, I don't have to tell this group about diet, Mediterranean diet, the gut-brain axis, so important. I actually started a microbiome company with Gary Ruvkin, who discovered microRNAs over at Mass General, where we're actually screening 3,000 strains of bacteria from the human gut microbiome for the ability to protect against oxidative stress and neuroinflammation. And these are bacteria that are not on the yogurt container. These are ones you've never heard of, but we're packaging those into a new, more customized probiotic to try to, and doing trials in ALS and Alzheimer's disease. Finally, the other D would be dental hygiene. When we're screening the brain for infectious particles that might drive Alzheimer's pathology, we find periodontal bacteria to be the main culprits that are overly abundant in Alzheimer's brain. So flossing is very important to keep your mouth clean. So I want to end by just saying, this is a quote from my co-author of these books where I talk about some of this stuff with Deepak Chopra, that your mind and body today are the results of your choices and habits yesterday. But importantly, your mind and body tomorrow are the results of your choices and habits today. And you can change those habits and reprogram, rewire at any age. So an easy way to remember this is sleep more, meditate more, be in the moment more, see family and friends more, move more, learn more, eat better. But as a geneticist, I also have to say, choose your ancestors wisely, because genetics can also play a role. This is my group, the Genetics Aging Research Unit at Mass General, and my funding is from Cure Alzheimer's Fund and these other fine folks.
Incredible. Just incredible insights about what we can do. I'm going to remember SHIELD. So yeah, we can give a round of applause. Great insights. We have just one question for Lillian, just a short amount of time, but we want to ask you, what, if anything, you could share with this audience for our food service operators? What's one takeaway from everything that you've been working on around mindfulness and brain health that you can give to the audience today?
Your role as experts in food and taste is really critical to the well-being of the elderly, as they are decreasing the ability to smell and also taste. You can be extremely creative in getting them to eat the nutritious foods. And hopefully there are ways of increasing the unani aspect, using mushrooms and cheeses or yeast and so forth. And I really think that it's also beyond the taste. It's the appearance, it's the sound, it's the mouthfeel, and all those things. You are the expert, and I look forward to your help in helping our older population thrive and flourish. Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you again to Lillian and Dr. Tansey, really incredible insights, and working also alongside CIA, the Harvard team, as well as Montessori. So I'm going to turn it over now to Allison to wrap us up for the evening. Lillian will be around tomorrow, so if you want to chat with her and connect and brainstorm ideas on working together, that would be super. Thank you.
What an incredible series of opening presentations to kick off this year's Menus of Change. It is now my pleasure to invite you all to enjoy an opening reception outside at the Beverage Plaza, the Beverage Garden Plaza, which is just outside the main level doors. We have beautiful Hudson Valley summer weather this evening, so get outside and enjoy that. And the reception features our leading conference sponsors. We'll also have book signings by Matthew Raiford, who you heard from today, and also from Eric Oberholzer, who will be at a breakout session tomorrow, but you may know him as the co-founder of Tender Greens, and he just came out with a new book called The 10-Year Plan. So be sure to check those books and have the opportunity to get signatures. In the spirit of sustainability, I just want to bring your attention to our efforts to make this event as low waste as possible. So as you engage in all the delicious meals during the reception and throughout the 3 days, you'll notice that almost everything we're using is compostable or recyclable, except for any plastic wrappers, yogurt cups, or tea bags. So we have signs posted near all the waste bins as reminders, or you can ask any one of us. And we encourage you to stay hydrated during these warm summer days by keeping your water bottle filled and with you throughout your time. Our final reminder is that in addition to the app, you can also go to the MOC website to find a variety of resources, including presentations and all the meal recipes, which will be posted within the week after the conference. So thank you again for being here, and now please go enjoy yourselves outside at the reception, and we'll see everyone back here tomorrow for breakfast starting at 7:30. Thank you.
Huli is a Hawaiian word meaning to curl or flip. Traditional Hawaiian huli dishes are cooked rotisserie style, charring all sides of the marinated fish, pork, or chicken. In this huli salmon bowl, we're using thick, delicious cuts of marinated and grilled Aqua Bounty salmon and served with a bowl of multigrain mix of rice, quinoa, and purple barley. I'm topping this Hawaiian-style salmon bowl with grilled pineapple, red onion, cucumber, pickled carrots, and avocado. Let me show you how it's made. We'll start by making our huli marinade. Combine all the ingredients in a large bowl. Reserve and refrigerate about a half a cup of the mixture for basting the fish and red onions. Add the salmon to the remaining mixture and stir until the fish is evenly coated. Cover with plastic wrap and refrigerate for 4 hours, turning the salmon at least once. Now let's get grilling. Preheat a grill and brush the red onions and pineapples with sesame oil and season with salt. Grill them on both sides until just cooked through, well marked, and nicely caramelized. Cut the pineapple into chunks. Separate the onion rings and sprinkle both with togarashi. Set these aside. Add the salmon to the grill and cook covered for 4 to 8 minutes, turning to keep the salmon from burning. Baste the salmon with the reserved marinade. Continue to grill until the fish is cooked through. Cooking times will vary depending on the size of the salmon, so be sure to check for doneness. Now we're ready to assemble our dish. Place a spoonful of the multigrain mix in a bowl. Top with some of the grilled pineapple chunks, grilled red onions, cucumber ribbons and pickled carrots, and some avocado. Place a portion of the salmon on top, sprinkle with green onions, micro cilantro, and finish with furikake. Here's our flavor-packed Hawaiian huli huli salmon bowl with our Aqua Bounty salmon fillets. Perfect for lunch or dinner. Aloha!
Right now, a company called Aqua Bounty is creating a sustainable future for seafood. With a growing global population and increased consumer demand, the current supply of seafood can't fill the gap. We just can't fish our way out of this. Catching more wild salmon would potentially harm wild fish populations, and creating new sea cage salmon farms can have a negative impact on the oceanic environment. With these concerns weighing on chefs and consumers, Aqua Bounty presents a solution. The Atlantic salmon bred by Aqua Bounty is the safe, secure, and sustainable alternative that chefs and consumers have been looking for. Aqua Bounty salmon is an option for anyone looking for fresh salmon that is good for them and good for the planet. Aqua Bounty's network of land-based fish farms, combined with the innovation of careful genetic engineering, is an answer to the rapidly increasing demand for high-quality seafood. It's a perfect pairing. Salmon raised closer to where consumers eat it, designed to grow more efficiently. Aqua Bounty Atlantic salmon were genetically modified one time 30 years ago to help the fish during the critical early stage of growth. Aqua Bounty raises the salmon in freshwater in carefully monitored land-based fish farms in North America. Aqua Bounty created an environment where the salmon swim and school naturally in a way that conserves freshwater and other natural resources. Aqua Bounty farms are built to grow and deliver fresh, nutritious salmon that is free of antibiotics and other contaminants, and with no impact to wild fisheries. Think about the possibilities. Right now, Atlantic salmon is one of many seafoods typically imported from overseas. Aqua Bounty Atlantic salmon are raised responsibly in the American heartland and in Canada. Aqua Bounty takes their responsibility of protecting the fish and the environment seriously. The fish are beautiful, and they're loaded with healthy fat content, nutrients, and flavor. For chefs and consumers alike, that really hits the spot. Aqua Bounty is thinking big, working to make our world a better place using smart science and safe, proven technology to help solve serious global problems like food security and climate change. Together, let's create a roadmap for the future of our food supply. Aqua Bounty provides reliable access to fresh, delicious, and responsibly raised Atlantic salmon. All you have to do now is serve it up. Join us.
I'm going to show you how to make a decadent treat that's not only incredibly delicious, but made more sustainably. These cherry cheesecake brownie bars are rich, fudgy brownies with a creamy cheesecake and a sweet tart cherry pie topping. Because they're made with Perfect Day's egg replacer and cream cheese, they're better for the planet. First, preheat the oven to 350 degrees. Spray a 9 by 13 inch pan and line it with parchment. In the bowl of a stand mixer, add the Perfect Day cream cheese, sugar, vanilla essence, baking powder, and salt. Mix on high speed, scraping periodically until it's completely smooth. Set this aside while we make our brownies. In a medium bowl, add the Perfect Day brownie mix, water, and oil, and stir with a rubber spatula until everything is completely mixed. Now we're ready to make our layers. Spread the brownie batter in the bottom of the pan. Next, spoon the cheesecake mixture over the brownie. It doesn't matter if there are some gaps. Spoon the cherry pie filling over the cheesecake mixture, and using a palette knife, swirl through all the layers to create a nice marble effect. Bake the cherry cheesecake brownie for 35 to 45 minutes. Test the center of the pan with a skewer to make sure that the brownie layer is cooked. Allow the cherry cheesecake brownie to cool to room temperature and then chill in the fridge for 1 hour before cutting into squares. These cherry cheesecake brownie bars look gorgeous, taste amazing, and are all made with the planet in mind. Enjoy. This gorgeous pound cake has a few secret ingredients for a moist, dense cake every time. The addition of Perfect Day's animal-free cream cheese, egg replacer, and milk makes this pound cake climate-friendly and so delicious. Let me show you how to make it. Preheat the oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit and line the bottom of a standard loaf pan with oiled parchment paper. In a large bowl, sift together the flour, baking powder, salt, Perfect Day egg replacer, and cornstarch. In the bowl of a stand mixer, place Perfect Day cream cheese, butter, sugar, lemon zest, and vanilla bean seeds. Mix on high speed, scraping periodically until completely smooth. Add the dry ingredients alternately with Perfect Day milk, ending with the dry ingredients. Spoon into the loaf pans or sheet pans and smooth the top. Bake the loaves for about 1 hour and make sure to cool the loaves completely before slicing. This pound cake made with Perfect Day cream cheese is delicious on its own or is a perfect blank canvas to add any of your favorite flavors and toppings.
Doishi Nippon Project, or Delicious Japan Project, was launched by the Tokita Seed Company to bring delicious and beloved Japanese vegetables to American chefs and home cooks. The Doishi Nippon Project focuses on the vegetable staples of washoku,